Address.
You're listening to Higher Powered Radio.
Okay, so my bad, a little bit out of traffic, but I'm going to do a little traffic for you real quick here locally. It's bad out there. I'm looking at this, and I want to caution everybody, please take a break, catch your breath, slow down. You're not going to go anywhere quick. I'm telling you, it is all across the bridges, the city. It's just a Friday afternoon that's a snarl. So be cool and keep your composure. All right. So welcome back. This is Higher Powered Radio. I'm Matt Dukes, and I want to pick up where we left off. So we're kind of going through what are typically considered to be the 12 steps. And by no means am I trying to represent anything that has anything to do with this being the sole resource for any kind of recovery. What my point is, I'm just trying to help educate a little bit. So if you're a parent or you're a spouse, or you're a family member and you're hearing somebody who's talking about trying to go do this stuff and they start to talk to you about this, I want to encourage you, go find out some information, go get some education. Don't simply leave this to being told by somebody who's still in active addiction how the recovery program works, because you're going to need some help yourself. Your family is going to need some tools, some resources, something to be able to give you some hope and strength, because man, you've been lied to, you've been drug over the coals, you've been bailing out, you've been covering up for, you've been taking abuse from, and that stuff takes its toll, and that's why they call this stuff a family disease. So if you need to reach out, you got some questions, by all means, it's Matt Dukes at higherpowerradio.com, or there's plenty of resources out there. Just go do some researching. So we did the first two, which is basically admitting that I was powerless over my addiction, that my life had become unmanageable, and that I came to believe that there was a power greater than me that could restore me to sanity. Now I'm at step 3, and this is a big one, because this is where they say that psychic change happens, right? Because step 3 says, I made a decision to turn my will and my life over the care of God as I understood him, right? And it says as we, let me correct it, it says as we understood him, because my understanding of a lot of stuff at that point in my life was pretty tweaked. I was pretty messed up, because I had a bad understanding of what I thought the cops should be doing, or what I thought my relationships would look like, or my family, or my job, or my employer, or my money, or whatever, let alone God. And so that's what it says, is that I had to make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as we understood him, okay? So I'm going to break that down a little bit, and because a lot of people get stuck with it, as I did, with what the heck you mean make a decision? So, well, it's simply that. And I know we overthink this a lot. And so when I made a decision to get up and go to work this morning, I took action. I got up, took a shower, shaved, had to do all of those things. Got dressed, got in the car, went to work, showed up, right, and did the work. If I just simply made a decision to go to work today and laid there in bed and did nothing, nothing changes. So if nothing changes, nothing changes. So when I made a decision to turn my will and my life, I struggled a lot with, because I didn't have a healthy understanding of what that higher power in my life looked like. I sure as heck didn't trust God. I sure as heck really didn't want anything to do with him, because, man, I had prayed many times before in the past, oh God, get me out of this. Don't let him arrest me. Don't let her leave me. Let me get in. Let me get out. Give me money. Don't take that from me. And those, what they call those foxhole prayers, which were covering my head as well as my backside, didn't work out real well. I never got to a place in my life in my addictions that I felt content with. I had moments sublime, don't get me wrong, I had a lot of fun. There were a lot of times in my life I had a lot of good times, but man, it was always followed by that calamity. So when I got forced to face this decision-making process of turning my life over to somebody or something, right? It's had to start small. And I'm going to encourage everyone with this kind of stuff. This is where they talk about sponsorship, or they talk about home groups, or they talk about fellowship. Because I can tell you, and there's a couple of men in my life that when I was 30 years old this last time, I started to watch how they live their lives. And it was from a distance, because listen, when I showed up, man, I still had a chip on my shoulder and was very angry and self-righteous and very opinionated, and so I kind of had a lot of a lot of energy directed outward that I should have been focusing a little more inward. But as I watched these guys that either grew in business, or how they treated others, or how they were consistent in their activities, that if they said they were somebody, they showed up somewhere, or if their lifestyle was less erratic, they weren't as, and I'm a spontaneous guy, that's not my point, but they were less chaotic. Let me put it to you that way. They made their car payments. They made their mortgage payments. They took their paychecks home. They didn't all of a sudden show up and go, oh my God, I got a new car. They didn't show up and go, yeah, look what I bought this. Or, man, oh my God, and they sure as heck weren't showing up going, man, I just blew all my money. I blew all my paycheck on a horse race, or on the card game last night, or the drunkenness, or the everything else that went along with that stuff in my life or in others' lives, right? And so I started to see these guys be consistent. And so a lot of people talk about when they show up in these recovery groups how everybody's happy and smiling and laughing, and there's not a lot of trust in that. And I knew, being around recovery most of my life, that there was a genuineness to that, but what I didn't ever notice is that there was a contentedness in it. Now listen, I couldn't comprehend things like serenity and peace and joy and happiness and friendship. I didn't have any friends, man. I had associates. I had dudes and guys that I partied with. I had a lot of dates, but I sure as heck didn't have any healthy relationships. And so as I started to watch other guys do that in their lives and emulate that and give them the opportunity to speak into my life about decisions I needed to make, keeping a job, quitting a job, how to save money, how to lose money, how to spend it, how to have a relationship, all that kind of stuff. And I saw me start to get better results. I started to build that trust. As I started to build that trust in these guys and then ask them questions about how they developed that in their life, they started to then speak to me about a greater understanding of a power greater than them in their lives. And that's how that door opened. It's not, listen, some people talk about that big white light experience. It wasn't that for me. I didn't have that. I told you, I've talked about this before in the past. I've always had a conception of God. I always knew he was there. His tone, temperament, tempo, his character has never changed. It's the same voice in my head today that I had in my head at 6 years old, when I was struggling with the chaos in my home, when I was dealing with, at 12 and 14 years old, the demons and battles and depression and addictions that had begun already then. God's voice in my head that would speak to me, and I'm not trying to get into this whole auditory thing about whether God talked to me or not, but we all have it. In my mind's eye, when I talk to a God in my life, I know who that is, and I know who's speaking back to me most times. I'm a little crazy still sometimes, and it could be me, but I'll take that chance. But as I started now in recovery, and I started to trust that a little bit of, all right, man, I'm going to give you another chance, and I saw the results that came from that, it started to grow. And there is a maturing process that comes with that. Time takes time. It took me a long time to get as sick as I was. It sure wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to get healthy and well overnight. They talk about travel, walking into the woods, man. If you take 10 hours to walk in the woods, you're not going to walk out in an hour, right? Same principle applies in our lives about spiritual growth. I can tell you, for me, the whole premise of my addictions stem from that relationship with God in my life. When I am fighting him and I'm struggling and I'm running and I'm not wanting to do what I feel my conscience is telling me to do, then there are things that I will suffer natural consequences for. When I'm willing to trust and submit and make the decision to turn my will and life over to him, there's an ease that happens. Sometimes it's still painful, don't get me wrong, but there's an ease that comes in that, and that I may not want to accept it, but I know in my heart of hearts. So I can tell you, we're going to start now looking at some of the steps that are going to be the action steps, because this is where we start taking a look at our lives and the decisions I've made and the actions that I've taken and the consequences they have that they have been in my life as well as in others, and the damage that I've done. And it's a hard thing to look at that stuff, and it's a hard thing to go to somebody else and talk to them about that. One, specifically if I'm going to sit and talk to somebody and tell them all the bad stuff I did, man, I had no interest in any of that. So I don't want to start down that path too soon. We've got the steps that come in an order specifically. And this next one is the fourth step, and this is a very difficult one because, and I'll tell you what it is now, and we'll talk about it when we come back, but what it says basically is we made a searching and fearless moral inventory. And we're going to talk about fearless and searching and what is moral and it's difficult and why it's so difficult to do that. Because I can tell you, the first thing that came to mind with all this stuff is that after years of drinking and drug abuse, man, I didn't have the clearest mind in the world, and I was unable to comprehend the simplicity to some of this stuff. And as I tried to figure out, because I would try and figure out court hearings, and I would try and figure out tickets and bills and relationships, and man, and I would think and think and think. The same thing applies to the steps. I would try and think and think and think, looking for the easier, softer way to do this stuff. And then what I found is that it's just like anything with inertia. The hardest thing about doing it is starting it. But once I started, it all just kind of came pouring out. And so when we come back, we're going to talk about that impending fourth step that everybody really struggles with. I'm Matt Dukes. This is Higher Powered Radio.